to set up a please wait screen, but I didn't because I didn't prepare. I apologize, not really. Hi everyone. We should be live on YouTube now. I don't know if you saw the beginning there. Where's my mixer page? There you are. Oh, echo. Let me hide that. There we go. Pop out my chat because that's what we got to do every single week. Hi. Tornaquet. I'm gonna struggle pronouncing that username. Let's close that window. Don't need that anymore. Hello, YouTube chat as well. I can see you now as well. Pop out that chat. Dan isn't here this week. It's just me on my own. So if you don't like my voice, this isn't going to be the episode for you. Yeah, Dan's still on vacation, so you'll see Dan and his tan next week. But this week he got me on my own. Hopefully that's good enough. There's a lot to talk about this week as well, so Dan really chose a hell of an episode to not be part of. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. If you are in the chat, I'm going to use you as a sort of co-host this week. So for whatever topic I'm talking about, if you have any opinions or questions, do throw them in the chat, and if there's any good ones, I'll sort of bounce off them and have an almost conversation with the chat on the podcast, because it's going to get pretty boring just listening to me talk for an hour. Or hopefully not an hour, but it might actually run an hour this week because there's a whole bunch of things we need to talk about. Like I said, it's been a busy week. So yeah, we'll wait just a couple more minutes and we'll start at the 1:30 as we normally do. Hello everyone. Just make sure I've got my notes and important topics to talk about. I probably don't need to play that. There we go. Let's get rid of that. Excuse me. What else do we need to talk about here? I'm going to not read up on that topic because I think I know most of the things that I need to talk about. Let's hear my thoughts on the phone app feature. I've done a video on it, and my thoughts are in that video. I like it. The phone app, the Your Phone app is pretty great. I think it's a great venture that Microsoft is following. Couple more minutes and we'll start. Yes. So yeah, like I said, we'll try and keep this to an hour, hopefully less than an hour, but I don't know how long I'll be able to ramble on about certain topics. Can I make that brighter? I'm just so dark in here today. I've changed my setup slightly. Has the Your Phone app been improved much over the last 12 months? Yeah. Has SMS support now. You can see up to 2,000 of your most recent photos. Plus a whole bunch of other things that I cannot remember. Check it out. It's nice if you have an Android device. Talk about the leak of the Duo from yesterday. We will definitely be talking about that on the show. Don't you worry. What did you think of Windows search failing earlier in the week? I will be talking about that on the podcast as well, so stay tuned for that. And with that, we should probably begin because it's 1:30. I'll get my intro ready here. Well, I'll do that again. Right. This is the Windows Central Podcast, episode 165 for February 7th, 2020. Hey everyone, Zach Bowden here, and welcome back to another episode of the Windows Central podcast. Dan is out this week, he's on vacation, so it's just me. You've got another solo episode of the Windows Central podcast. And Dan picks a hell of a week to not be here because a lot happened this week in the world of Microsoft. So I'm going to spend the next hour, hopefully less than that, but we'll see how long I can ramble on for, talking to myself about Microsoft news. And I'm going to use the chat because we're doing this live. We have a chat this time. I'm going to use the chat as a sort of co-host to bounce off of. If they've got any interesting opinions or questions, I will read them out and sort of bounce off them as we go along. So let's quickly do the rundown of the show. In this episode, we'll be talking about Panos Panay's new role as leading both Surface and the Windows client side of things. That's a big deal. We'll also be talking about a Surface Duo being spotted in the wild and what that's revealed to us on the hardware so far. We'll also sort of update ourselves on the Surface Hub 2X and its status. Microsoft confirmed this week that it's probably not going to ship anytime soon. Also this week, Windows Search went down. We'll talk a little bit about that and what happened to users trying to search on their PCs. Also, just breaking now, about 30 minutes ago, Microsoft Edge for ARM is now available in the stable channel, which is kind of a big deal. And Build 2020 registration is now open. So if you're a developer looking to go to Build, you might want to buy your ticket now because they will sell out at some point. And then we'll see if there's anything else to talk about at the end of the show. So let's dive into the first topic of the week, I guess. Panos Panay. So this week, Microsoft did a reorg. Microsoft reorgs teams internally at Microsoft all of the time. So usually it's not that big of a deal. But this week, it is a big deal because Panos Panay is now in charge of not only the hardware team, but Windows Client as well. Windows Client is the Windows you and I care about. That's the Windows user experience, the Windows shell, and feature set that sits on top of Windows. So Panos is now in charge of that, and that's a big deal for, I think, obvious reasons. It allows Microsoft to build both hardware and software hand in hand from the top down rather than working together as separate teams. So this is more of a formalization of what Windows and Surface have been doing since the beginning. Back in the Windows 8 days, Surface and Windows sort of worked together on things here and there to make the experiences better across both platform and hardware. But now Panos is in charge of the Windows side of things when it comes to the user experience. Now, this isn't all of Windows. Windows is split up into a number of different teams these days. The engineering side of it's under Azure, and that hasn't changed. It's just the top layer, the UX, the user experience, and feature set that users interact with, that's now under Panos. And what this should result in, obviously we don't know yet for sure, but what this should result in is down the line, closer integration between the software and hardware, meaning hardware ideas are no longer limited to whatever it is Windows is doing. So in the past, if the Surface team wanted to build a new device, they were really only limited to the kind of devices they could build that makes sense for the version of Windows that's out at the time. So Microsoft couldn't make a smartwatch, for example, running Windows because there isn't a version of Windows that makes sense on that kind of device. Now, I'm not saying Microsoft can make a smartwatch now. They probably won't. There's no reason to. But Microsoft can sort of push boundaries when it comes to hardware ideas and innovation now because it has control of Windows. So if it wants to sort of change up a form factor, it can build a user experience that makes sense around it alongside the Windows team since they're under the same team. Wow, Channel 1 is also sponsoring a solo episode of the podcast. Hilarious. So yeah, this is very much like how Apple does things. So, for those who don't know, Apple sort of controls everything from the top down. Software, hardware, silicon, they have it all inside iPad and iPhone at least. Now Microsoft has similar control over the software and hardware when it comes to OS and sort of the hardware form factor. Microsoft may decide to go into silicon at some point, I don't know. But as of right now, this is good news for Surface hardware more so than Windows. Well, it's good news for everybody, really, because let's think about it. Panos Panay he's very passionate about the things he works on, and I have a feeling he wants to see Windows sort of polished more so than it is currently, because I know I do. If I was in charge of Windows, that would be my number one priority. It'd be polishing the UI and making it consistent and fluid. That would be my number one goal for Windows. At the same time, if I was in charge of the hardware side as well, I'd want both teams to work together to sort of encourage each other to do better than whatever it is they're doing currently. So, like I said in the past, if the hardware team wants to build a new form factor, the Windows team should be able to accommodate that, rather than the hardware team being forced to build products around whatever it is Windows is doing. Now both can work together, and collaboration can go both ways, and we can come up with better products. Now, a good example of what this may look like is with Windows 10X and Surface Neo. Windows 10X exists purely because hardware makers wanted to build a new form factor that doesn't really make sense with the current Windows user experience, Windows 10's user experience, that is. Foldable PCs and Windows 10 Pro don't go hand in hand, because Windows 10 Pro is a very static OS. It's not fluid, it's not adaptive, and on a form factor that folds and changes postures, you need an operating system that can adapt, and that's what Windows 10X is. So hopefully that's what we're going to see going forward. We're going to see more sort of flavors and iterations of Windows for new form factors where it makes sense. So the hardware teams are no longer limited in what they can create, and the software teams should hopefully have more weight behind them for branching out and trying new innovative ideas. And that, to me, is a really, really, really exciting thing. So when can we expect to see some of these changes take place? We have no idea. Panos hasn't even taken over yet. He will be taking over the Windows client on February 25th. This report comes from Mary Jo Foley, by the way, so credit to her for breaking this story. There was also a couple other people moving around. Joe Belfiore is moving over to Office. He's still in charge of Microsoft's mobile experiences, so that includes Microsoft Launcher, Outlook, Edge for Android and iOS. But he's moving off of Windows when it comes to Windows 10 and onto Office now. So he's going to sort of lead Office and make Office better. Someone else moved around as well. Let me pull up the article and I will tell you exactly who moved around. So yes, Panos Panay moved. Well, he didn't move. He's just sort of adopted Windows client. No, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the most important ones there. So there was an email from Panos that sort of detailed his plans a little bit. I'll read this sort of word for word here. Personally, I'm very excited to lead the Windows client for Microsoft, which will help us streamline our decision-making processes, be clear on our priorities, and deliver the best end-user experiences from Silicon through operating systems across all Microsoft apps and service-connected devices, which includes OEMs and Surface. We believe this will make the Windows client experience better for the entire PC ecosystem. Designing hardware and software together will enable us to do a better job on our long-term Windows bets, dual screen, silicon diversity, connectivity, app platform, etc. And having a single point of Windows client experience leadership driving consistent priorities and resourcing across all of Windows client will help all of us accelerate innovation and improve execution. So pretty much just what I said. This is an amazing time and opportunity to bring more energy to Windows and our customers using Windows. It won't be easy, but extending our growth will be key for our company's strategy. So this is, in my opinion, arguably the best news Windows has received in the last couple of years. I would argue that Windows has sort of taken a back seat recently in the last 2 or 3 releases. 1903, I believe, introduced the light theme, but that's pretty much it. 1909, nothing. Was it 1903? I can't remember. Either way, the 2019 releases of Windows 10 were not huge in any way. The 20H1 release that's just about to come out in a month or so also really has nothing new in it. The Cortana experience has been updated, but other than that, there's very minor changes here and there. And I expect that to be the same with 20H2 as well. This year is not going to be a big year for Windows Desktop, as priorities have sort of focused on Windows 10X, which makes sense. That's the new platform coming out. They need to make sure that at launch, Windows 10X is more than great, because first impressions matter, and if Windows 10X launches with bugs and laggy animations and slow performance, then nobody's going to adopt it, and that effort will be dead in the water. So they need to focus on Windows 10X. That makes sense. I'm allowing 2020 to be a boring year for Windows 10 Desktop, but 2021, I expect Microsoft to come back shouting with new features and changes. I hope, at least. But again, like with Panos in charge now, who knows what will happen? We could see all sorts of new things show up in Windows, all sorts of new user experiences and innovative ideas and changes. I don't think we'll see anything drastic, because the people who use Windows are very sort of particular, most of them anyway. They don't like change, because Windows is a tool to most people. It's not something people use because they love it. They use it because they have to. So if it changes, people get annoyed. So Microsoft can't do too much with Windows 10 desktop in that area. They could add new features here and there, but the user experience itself, I don't think can change drastically, at least not all at once. If you introduce bits and pieces over time, then perhaps you can get away with it. But a huge update that just changes everything isn't going to happen on desktop. But that's what Windows 10 X is for, and future Windows Core editions where Microsoft can branch out and innovate and do new things, because they're new platforms and new products on new device form factors, and that's where people's expectations are lowered much further and are more open to new ideas. That's why Surface Neo makes sense. It's a device with dual screens. If you're buying a Surface Neo, you're probably open to the idea of a new thing, trying out something new. Therefore, the operating system itself can be different in almost every way, and Windows 10 X is quite different from Windows 10. Someone's asking, do you know if Panos was in favour of using Android on the Duo, or if he would have preferred Andromeda on it? I think most people at Microsoft would have preferred Andromeda or the Duo running Windows. I think, if you work for Microsoft, you probably love Windows and you would rather see Windows on every product you release. However, just because that's what you want doesn't mean that's the best option for that device. What's more important, pleasing a few people or pleasing a majority of people? With the Surface Duo, and I think most people at Microsoft agree here, Android is the only option. They could have done a Surface Duo with Windows. It would have failed quite spectacularly. So what's the point? That's kind of, what is the point of doing that product if they know it's going to fail? Because that would have failed. There is no scenario where Andromeda with Windows succeeded, because there was no app platform. Well, there is an app platform, but there's no apps on that platform. That's why Windows Phone basically kicks the tin can. That would have been the exact same thing. So Android is the right choice for that. Everybody at Microsoft probably agrees that yes, Android is the better choice, but I'm sure most of them would have preferred to see Windows running on the Duo. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, Panos Panay leading Windows client. It's going to be an interesting couple of years for Windows indeed, now that Panos is taking charge of the client side of things. I do wonder if Panos will focus more on Windows Core SKUs rather than desktop. I would hope he focuses on desktop as well, because desktop is where the majority of people are. In fact, most of them are, because Windows Core isn't out yet, technically. All right, moving on to our next topic of the week. Surface Duo spotted in the wild. This always happens with products that have been announced way in advance, because that's just how it goes. Surface Duo was spotted on a train this week in the hands of some person who I guess works for Microsoft. Normally this wouldn't be news, because we've seen the Duo in high quality renders. Why would we care about some grainy photo of a Surface Duo? Well, because this Surface Duo has a slight tweak to the hardware, in that it has a front-facing flash sensor on it. Now, I've asked around a little bit about this, and not all prototypes have this. I mean, we've seen from October they didn't have them. But even more recent prototypes don't have this flash as well. So some of them do, some of them don't. I would be surprised if Duo ships without a flash, because the front-facing camera on it is the only sensor, as far as we're aware. I've not seen any recent Surface Duo prototypes that has a rear-facing sensor. Now, I know we saw back in October a black version of Surface Duo that did have a back camera lens. There's a story behind that, which I don't know if I can go into, but I do not expect that to ship. I don't think that's going to be something that we see on the shipping version of Surface Duo. So when it does ship, I expect that the single front-facing sensor will be the only camera lens on the device, which is why on this prototype that we saw spotted in this photo, the flash is above the screen on the right side next to the camera lens, because that is both the front and rear-facing camera. So that's very interesting. Otherwise, the photo doesn't reveal anything else new. It still looks like a Surface Duo. If anything, it might be a tad thicker, but you couldn't tell from afar. The only reason I'm saying that is because I've been told through multiple people that recent prototypes are just a tiny bit thicker, because to improve battery life, because battery life on some of the prototypes wasn't amazing. I'm hearing it's better now, so that's a good news at least. But yeah, I don't think so. A lot of people are saying to me, "Oh, I feel sorry for the guy. Probably going to get fired." I don't think he will, because as far as I'm aware, Microsoft is actually encouraging those who have Surface Duos now, because they are seeding it to more people at Microsoft. Microsoft is actually encouraging those who are self-hosting the device or dog-fooding it to use it and use it in public and use it as if they were using a normal smartphone. The only rule is don't let anybody touch it. You can use it in public and stuff, but don't be sort of openly showing it off and handing it to people and whatnot, because it's not ready. It's still running pre-release software, and it has secrets in the hardware and whatnot that they haven't revealed. But they are allowed to just use it. If you have a Surface Duo at Microsoft, you are allowed to use it in public like a normal smartphone, because they need to get that real-world testing. They need to be on public transport. They need to be high up in skyscrapers or low underground to see how reception is and whatnot. They need to test the device in every part of the world. So, yeah, I don't think the guy will get in trouble. It's kind of sucky that it's never cool taking a photo of someone else as they're using a product without asking. But hey, there you go. A few news outlets called onto my hints finally that Surface Duo will be launching earlier than anticipated. I say will be, as if it's for definite. I've been hearing for a little while now. I've been hearing whispers that Surface Duo will be launching ahead of holiday 2020, quite considerably, in fact. And I've been hearing that Surface Duo might launch in time for the summer, maybe even before then, in the spring. And there's multiple reasons for this, primarily because Surface Duo is further ahead, is ahead of schedule compared to Surface Neo, which is running Windows 10X, which is running a new Windows. Surface Duo runs Android, and it's based on Android 10, which was finalized in August last year. So what Microsoft is focused on right now is just the software experiences on top of Android. So the inbox app experiences and the OS specific customizations for Duo. And I'm told most of that work will be done by April. So then there's April to holiday 2020. That's a long time just to sit on a product, right? So why not start shipping it much earlier? And I believe the plan for Surface Duo, if everything goes to plan, of course, things could slip or things get cancelled all the time. Plans get cancelled. If everything goes according to plan, Microsoft will start shipping Surface Duo in the spring/summertime, and I believe it'll be more focused at enthusiasts and developers at first. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Microsoft have an initial batch of Surface Duos available to buy at build for developers, possibly at a discounted price. I don't think they'll give it away. Those days are gone, unfortunately. But I do expect we'll be able to sort of buy a Surface Duo much earlier than holiday 2020. Surface Neo is another story. I do not think we'll be buying that anytime soon. I would be surprised if Surface Neo makes it for holiday 2020. I wouldn't be surprised if they pushed it back to 2021. But I've not heard anything on that specifically. I just keep hearing that Windows 10X is behind quite a bit, and they're at a point now where they're deciding what to cut for the initial launch. So if they decide to cut too much, they might have to just delay it entirely. But who knows on that front? Like I said, I've not got any concrete info on that specifically. Let's see if there's any comments here. Doesn't appear to be. So someone's asking, should we expect 5G in the Duo? I do not think so. Only because I've heard that the Surface Duo will ship with an 855 and not an 865. If it was with an 865, then it would be required to have 5G capabilities, as far as I'm aware. But most of the prototypes, I believe all of them, in fact, are still 855s. If Microsoft is planning to start shipping Duo anytime soon, they would need to be testing prototypes with an 865 in it. And as far as I'm aware, they're not doing that. I could be wrong on that. I haven't been able to confirm that myself, of course. But asking around, a few people have said to me that it looks to be an 855 inside the prototypes. So that means it's going to be shipping with last year's flagship processor, which is good and bad. Good because it likely means it'll cost less because I've always said the Surface Duo will probably cost $1,500 starting, but if it's launching with last year's processor, I think it could be a bit less than that. Especially if they opt for a 64 gig, 6 gigabyte of RAM config as the entry level. That could be a sort of iPhone prices, iPhone X prices, or whatever the latest flagship iPhone is. Which would be a big deal. If Microsoft can get it that low, then it actually might be able to contend with the likes of Samsung and iPhone. I don't think it would beat out any of them, of course, but I think it would make it a lot more appetizing to a lot more people if it is much cheaper than $1,500. If they can get it at $1,000 or even $1,100, I will be very, very impressed. But that's all speculation at this point. I don't know for a fact if that's what they're planning to do. Someone's saying, wasn't Windows 10X already behind schedule when they wanted to launch it as Andromeda? Well, Windows Core's always been behind schedule, and that actually leads us quite nicely into our next topic. Service Hub 2X. So we talked a bit about this last week. Last week we were talking about some things that I'd heard, and Brad Sams and Petri, about the Service Hub 2X not shipping, or at least being delayed. I had heard back in December, I think it was, that the version of Windows Core that Microsoft was building for the Service Hub 2X had been deprecated. Development was no longer happening on that version of Windows Core. And that left a window open as to a question: what will the Service Hub 2X ship? Now, I had asked around, and a couple of people said to me, oh, it will likely ship with Windows 10X or a variant of at some point in the future. And that doesn't seem to be happening now. So Microsoft confirmed this week that the Surface Hub 2X isn't going to be shipping in 2020, and that it may or may not ship one in the future. Microsoft doesn't know if it's going to ship a Surface Hub 2X. They are on the fence about it by the sounds of things. Instead, they are committing to the Surface Hub 2S and releasing the 85-inch version of the Surface Hub 2S, as well as delivering a major software update for existing Surface Hub 2S and Surface Hub version 1 customers. So what does that mean? It means Microsoft is updating Windows 10 Team to version 2004. For those who don't know, Windows 10 Team is stuck on version 1703, I think it is. It's an old version of Windows. And the reason they did that, I think, was because at the time they were working on Windows Core and at that new version of Surface Hub. But now they're not. So now they have to update the legacy version of Windows 10 Team to the latest version of Windows 10 to align it with desktop. And Microsoft says it will introduce some of the features it promised on the 2X with this software update on 2S devices, including rotation and tiling. Now, I don't know anything about this specifically, but I would be surprised if the rotation feature is the dynamic rotation that was shown off with the fluid shell that was on the Surface Hub 2X. I have a feeling it was just going to be you twist it and then it sort of just fades to black and then the orientation's changed. I would be very surprised if Microsoft is able to get... Well, actually, I say that. C# does run on Windows Legacy. They could do it. They really could do it, but I don't know, honestly. I have no idea how Microsoft is going to implement the tiling and dynamic rotation on legacy Windows, but we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, Microsoft will be delivering those features via a software update to 2S users now. So customers won't have to go out and buy a 2X cartridge, but it does mean that you won't be getting Windows Core on your Service Hub anytime soon. A good question. Someone's asking about multi-user login, which was a touted feature of the 2X. Microsoft hasn't said that will be coming to Service Hub 2S in a software update, which likely means they're not bringing it. It's not a thing that they could just port from Windows Core to legacy Windows. So the question now is, will Windows Core ever be coming for the Surface Hub? And the answer is, I don't know. Like I said, the version of Windows Core they were building for 2X has been deprecated. Now, they could very easily port Windows 10X to the Service Hub in the future. But in that case, when are they going to do that? Will that be next year? Will that be the year after? Will they just wait for Surface Hub 3? These are all questions that have no answers at this time. And I do think it's a real shame that Surface Hub won't be joining the Windows Core family this year. Because, as I've argued 1,000 times, Windows Core is the future of Windows. And the Surface Hub 2 was the ideal product for Windows Core. It's like a modern, fluid device. It just made sense with that platform. Yet Microsoft is unable to deliver it this year, unfortunately. You've got to remember, Service Hub 2X only exists. The reason they split Service Hub 2 into an S and X SKU is because of Windows Core. Windows Core is a thing that cannot be delivered via a software update because it's an entirely different version of Windows. But since Windows Core wasn't going to be ready in time, they needed to do a 2S with the existing version of Windows 10 Team. Customers can buy that, and if they want to upgrade to Windows Core, they have to buy an actual compute cartridge that has Windows Core pre-installed, because you can't just install it as a software update. But now Windows Core isn't coming, the 2X isn't needed no more. So that's why Microsoft is now focusing on the 2S and bringing a major software update to it instead. Like I said, a real shame in my opinion, but what can you do? I'm very worried about Windows Core for Windows 10X or the Surface Neo. I really, really hope that they ship that in good condition. I would be happy for them to delay it if it means it actually ships well. Because if they ship it and it's not done, it's going to be game over. It's really going to be game over for Windows 10X. I really, really, really hope that they don't. Man, that'd be really sad. All right, moving on to our next topic. Windows search. Why are we talking about Windows search? No one cares about searching their PC. Apparently, that's not true. Apparently, everybody searches their PC. This was the most popular story across our entire network at Mobile Nations this week. Windows search went down. And this sounds weird because what do you mean it went down? This is a thing, you search your PC, you can do it offline. Yes, you can, except you can't when you're connected to the internet. So this week, some service went down on Microsoft end, and across the whole world, it seems, the search box, when you type into the search box, that UI just disappeared. So that entire box appears to be a web page of some kind, or at least it's pulling data from a server somewhere that populates a UI. And if it's unable to pull that data, that UI doesn't pop up at all. Now, you'd think that if it can't connect to that server, then there'd be a fallback to just offline search. Apparently not. Windows didn't know to do that. It appears Windows was thinking that it was connected just fine, even though it wasn't pulling the data. So nobody could search their PCs. You couldn't search for apps or documents or anything. And that was a kind of a big deal. It was down for a few hours. I don't know how long exactly. It wasn't forever. But everybody freaked out about this. And it actually raised quite a few good questions, such as, does this mean my local files are indexed in the cloud? And the answer is, I don't know. I've asked Microsoft. They haven't gone back to me about this. It is a good question, because you'd think, well, why does the UI need to connect to the internet to show me files that are on my PC? It is interesting. Maybe there was a bug with an update they pushed out that caused the search UI to just disappear, and it wasn't trying to connect to the internet. We don't know, but it's been resolved now. However, not everybody is seeing the fix. Some users like me, I had to run a PowerShell command. Yes, Mike's saying it's still not working for him. There is a PowerShell command that you can run that Microsoft has provided, which will essentially reset Windows Search, and that fixed it for me on my Surface Studio here. So yeah, if you need to try that if it's not working for you. Someone's saying they keep delaying Windows 10 X for years. Well, yeah, they've been technically not delaying Windows 10 X. They delayed Andromeda OS a fair bit. But Windows 10 X, I think, has technically been on track since it started development in 2018. I think it was. I can't remember now. Right. Let's move on to our next story. Microsoft Edge is now available for ARM. Hooray. So Microsoft Edge has had a long journey when it comes to the ARM platform here.
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Thank you. I didn't ask you. Anyway, yeah, Microsoft Edge is now available on ARM in the stable channel, which is a big deal because up until now it hasn't been. It's only been available in the sort of insider channels on the beta, dev, and canary rings. But now it's running out to everybody. So if you have a Surface Pro X, I actually got one this week. Maybe I'll talk about that in a second. If you've got a Surface Pro X or a Galaxy Book S or any kind of Windows 10 on ARM device, the stable version of Microsoft Edge will now run natively on your device. And that's a big deal because it actually improves everything from web performance to RAM usage to just general app performance when switching tabs and just using the browser. It will feel way faster and way more fluid than it has in the past. And that's really, really quite nice. So it's updated to version 80, which introduces a couple of noteworthy new changes. Web app support has been slightly improved. It has Dolby Vision support now. And just general improvements and performance enhancements here and there for just every platform. So yeah, the version 80. I believe all the insider channels have shifted up a version now as well. So Canary's on version 82, Dev's on version 81, and I think Beta's about to move to version 81 as well. And then in 6 to 9 weeks, I guess we'll see Stay will get a new update to version 81. I don't know if that will be the case or if it will just be version 80 but with a couple of new features in it. Someone's saying by Edge, you mean Edgium? Yes, I mean the new Microsoft Edge based on Chromium. The old Microsoft Edge supports ARM64 already, and has done for a while. But nobody uses the old Edge. Well, if you do use the old Edge, it's probably because you prefer the inking or scrolling capabilities, or you use set tabs aside, like a What? Who uses set tabs aside? I cannot. I hated that feature so much. And the worst thing about it was that it was in such a prominent place in the Edge UI, and you couldn't remove it. I can't tell you the amount of times I accidentally pressed set tabs aside and closed about 12 tabs and then had to open them all up and reload every single tab again. I hate it so much. I wish you could just have, well, it's gone now in the new Edge, but in the old Edge, I wish you could have hidden it because it would have saved me a lot of time. Someone's asking, do you think the Surface Duo will have a 120Hz display? I do not. I think it'll be a bog standard 60Hz display, hopefully an OLED, because the device is so thin, I'd be surprised if it isn't an OLED. We know the resolution of it, it's 1800 by 1350, I believe, both screens. So it should be quite high quality. I hope it's OLED, but I do not think it'll be anything more than 60Hz. Because you've got to think about battery life. The Surface Duo is incredibly thin. I have asked around about battery life, and I mean, I'm hearing it's getting through a day with medium use. I don't think it's going to be like a endurance champ by any means. It's 2 displays. It's super thin. You know, they can't work miracles, but we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, I do not expect it to be more than 60Hz. I would be shocked if it's more than 60Hz. Right, Build 2020 registration's open. As I sort of said at the top of the show, Build 2020 is coming very soon, May 19th to the 21st. If you're a developer, you can now buy your ticket to attend. And that's cool. The reason I say this is because Windows Developer Day, Microsoft 365 Developer Day is next week on February 11th. And that's going to be a Windows 10X day. So Microsoft is expected to talk about Windows 10X and Surface Duo. And talk about dual screen app development and possibly even showcase the operating system in more detail on the Windows 10X side. And I would expect Microsoft to sort of branch out and talk more about this sort of thing at Build. And with the information I have about Surface Duo launching earlier than anticipated, I have a feeling those attending Build will be able to buy a Duo before anybody else. So if you, now, like I said, I do not buy your ticket based on that information alone because I cannot confirm it to 100%. This is more speculation than fact to keep in mind. But I'm just saying, if you are attending Build, there is a possibility that you will be able to buy a Surface Duo at that event. Maybe even for a discount, a slight discount, just to sort of encourage developers to buy one and build an app for it. Because Microsoft would like it if your app supported dual screens. Because not every app will support dual screens on Surface Duo. Most of Microsoft's apps will, of course. Outlook, Edge, Microsoft Launcher. But Twitter, for example, probably won't. You know, there's what kind of UI can Twitter build for dual screens? And the question I have is, will Microsoft limit the spanning ability if your app doesn't support dual screens? Because in the emulator, which is admittedly early software, the emulator allows you to span any app, regardless of if it supports spanning capabilities. So if you sort of span Twitter, it would just spread the UI across 2 displays, and it's not very good because you've got the seam down the middle, which means tweets just sort of run across both screens, and it looks kind of ugly. So I'm assuming in the shipping products, if you try to dock an app, or if you try to span an app that doesn't support spanning, it will just say no. You can't do that. What are you trying to do here? You crazy? Which is fine because the Surface Duo in its unique form factor can be used as a single screen phone. And that's sort of the big deal about having 2 displays and a 360-degree hinge. And in my opinion, is a selling point over something like the Galaxy Fold, which is 1 screen, but only has 180 degrees of opening, I guess, or an 180-degree hinge. Don't get me wrong, I like the Surface, the Galaxy Fold, but I do wish it had 2 screens and could fold all the way around, because I don't like the tiny screen on the outside. It is too small. I'd much rather a 5.6-inch massive display that the Surface Duo has. Excuse me, I'm just taking a quick drink there. Finally isn't a thing because we literally just talked about it. Microsoft 365 Developer Day next week. Just sort of PSA out there. It's next week. It's February 11th. It's going to be a big day for Windows 10X stuff. So if you are interested in Windows 10X, definitely tune into that stream, or stay tuned to Windows Central because we'll have all the news for you as it's happening. So yeah, I'm really, 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 really hoping we get a sort of in-depth look at the operating system because we haven't really had that yet. They're expected to release an emulator next week as well, hopefully February 11th. And if they do, I'll be doing a video on that deep dive on the OS as much as I can because again, it is an emulator, so it's going to be slow and but we'll try and get it working. Someone's asking, do the Microsoft earbuds, I'm guessing you mean the Surface earbuds, have live translation? I believe they do. I think that's something they touted as a feature. But yeah. So I think that's pretty much it for this episode. I'm looking for the comments here. I'm not seeing too many questions, unfortunately. But yeah, okay. I guess that's pretty much it for this week, guys. We kept it under an hour. That's fantastic. So like I said, Dan will be back next week. He'll be tanned, I assume. He's been in the sun all week, so we'll see what he looks like next week. But until then, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you in the next episode next week. Goodbye. Cool. So yeah, like I said, everybody, a much shorter episode this week. I will hang around a little bit for questions if you have any, of course. But without a partner to talk to, there's not much to say on things. Did I touch on Surface Duo 3? I didn't, actually. That's because we're kind of known for a while that Surface Duo 3 is in the worst. In the worst? In the works. What episode is this? 165. There we go. Oh, hi, Jason. Jason's in the chat. I didn't even see you there. See, I hate doing solo podcasts because it definitely feels like you ramble, but that's kind of the point. You're supposed to ramble in a solo podcast. You can't not. I could just say, oh yeah, Panos joined the Windows client team. You know, you have to ramble because otherwise there's no podcast when you're on your own, unfortunately. But I just hate it. I feel terrible every time I ramble. I just feel like it's not intelligent. I feel like I always go off track. I guess, well, I'll listen back later and see if it's worth releasing or not. Maybe this will be an episode of the podcast that never gets released. Is the Surface Duo going to be available on all carriers? That's an excellent question. So, with the knowledge that Surface Duo will be may be launching in the spring/summertime, I've been sort of hearing that this will be more of a soft launch aimed at enthusiasts and developers. I do not expect Microsoft to come out in the spring and be like, oh yeah, AT&T, Verizon, everyone's picking it up. I think that will happen, but later in the year. Microsoft said holiday 2020 for Surface Duo. That may still hold true in an official manner. If they're doing a soft launch in the spring/summer, they could do an official launch in the fall where they're like, okay, AT&T's on board, Verizon's on board, T-Mobile's on board. You can buy them in all of those carrier stores today. But I'd be surprised if that happens in the summer or before the fall. Do you think the Surface Duo will support dual SIM? That's a good question. I don't know. I don't think it does. At least nobody who I've spoken to has said it does. Will the Duo be available in Europe? Another excellent question. The answer again, I don't know. I do know that Microsoft... Oh, actually, I shouldn't say this. Here's what I will say. The Surface Duo has bands to support carriers outside of the US. Whether or not that means it'll be available on day one outside the US is another story, but the hardware definitely can function in countries that isn't the US. So the answer is I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But I would be surprised if it's US only forever. If anything, it'll be US only at first. Then it will slowly come to more markets. Or maybe Microsoft will surprise us and just release it everywhere at once. That'd be great, but I don't think so. I think it does have eSIM, the Surface Duo. So I think it'll be SIM card and eSIM. What do you think about the SwiftKey keyboard having animojis? Oh, the thing I hate, whatever SwiftKey's done for their version of Animoji is terrible, and they should never have spent time on it. It's really, really bad. I would have much preferred Microsoft focus on making typing better, but I digress. Any news on a Surface display? No. Outside of the rumors we already have about the Studio 3 being a modular thing, we don't have any more info on that. What happens to the old Microsoft Edge after the new one is installed? So Microsoft has built into Windows a sort of thing that will hide the old Microsoft Edge when the new one is installed. So what you'll see in the Start menu and taskbar is the icon will be replaced with the new one, and when you click on those, the listing in the apps list, it will take you to the new Edge and everything. There will be no way to access the old Microsoft Edge unless you go into group policy and sort of change that, or I think registry, you can do it through there as well. But yeah, once the new Microsoft Edge is installed, effectively it takes over and the old Microsoft Edge is no longer accessible to the end user. Windows updates all of its links and things so that it will open the new Edge instead of the old Edge at every opportunity. Do you think Windows 10 X can support virtual reality UI? I don't know. Honestly, I have no idea. Yeah, I'm guessing you mean plugging a VR headset in and having the mixed reality experience. I'm going to say no because I'm not. So technically, it should be possible. It's Windows, but I'm going to say no because it's Windows 10 X and it's designed for dual screen PCs that don't even have a dedicated graphics card. So on a technical level, at a software level, it should be possible, but at a hardware level, it isn't because it's not powerful enough. So I'm going to say no. It won't be there. So Duo will definitely cost more than a Series X. I'm going to say for definite it will cost more than a Series X. I wouldn't be surprised. I'd be shocked if the Series X is more than $499. If Microsoft wants to be competitive, they'll price it at $399. Because we know my phone is ringing. We know we know Sony is waiting for Microsoft to announce pricing on the Series X before it comes out and announces pricing for the PS5. And I think that's Sony's strategy here, is to undercut Microsoft in price. So I've argued, why doesn't Microsoft just price the Series X at $299 so that if Sony wants to price it any lower, then they're going to absolutely be operating at a loss, and Sony cannot afford to operate at a loss there because PlayStation is its only major selling product. I feel like Microsoft can afford to operate Xbox at a loss. I mean, it already is technically, just for 6 months, a year, just to sink Sony. I think it's a great plan. If I was in charge, that's exactly what I'd be doing. I'm gonna text. Do you know anything new about Windows Mixed Reality? I do not. I do know HoloLens 2 will be on showcase at MWC. Microsoft is holding an event and they'll probably do some demos showcasing some things that developers have built for Neo. What am I talking about? HoloLens. Sorry. I don't know if you can tell. I can't text and talk at the same time. It's impossible. This is why it's good to have two people on podcasts, because then they can take over whilst you deal with all the other things that are going on. I've realised during the podcast that I can't read the comments and talk at the same time. I'm not good at it. What's going on with IoTOS? Is it dead? If that's another Windows Core product, I don't know at this point. All of my focus is on Surface Duo and Surface Neo right now. Windows 10 X and the Surface Duo, of course. How do you like the Surface Pro X that you showed us earlier? So I've never been a huge fan of the Surface Pro form factor, the whole kickstand tablet with floppy keyboard thing. Even back in the original Surface days as well, I had a Surface RT, and I liked the Surface RT, but I very quickly found myself not using it and using a laptop over it. Not because it was Windows RT, but because of the form factor. I then got I had a Surface LT 2 as well. And again, sure, I liked the screen on it was much nicer. But the form factor, again, the floppy keyboard, the kickstand, the lappability issues, I just wasn't a huge fan of it. Then the Surface Pro 3 came out, and that improved things considerably, but it was still a device with a kickstand and a floppy keyboard. So although I liked that one way more, I still found myself using my Dell XPS much more than that at the time. And then I got a Surface Pro 4, had the same opinion. I was like, I bought all of these, I don't like them. And the Surface Pro 4 was where I drew the lines. I'm not buying any more Surface Pros. It's the form factor. It's just the core form factor that I don't like. It's not that the Surface product was bad. I think, the Surface Pro 3 and 4 are excellent products, were excellent products at the time. But I just couldn't get into the form factor. It just wasn't for me. So when the Surface Book came out, I bought the Surface Book, and I was happy with that for as long as I can remember, up until Surface Laptop. Then I got the Surface Laptop. I sort of went back and forth between the laptop and Book 2. So this is the first Surface Pro that I've purchased since the Surface Pro 4. And I actually really, really, really like it now. I don't know what's changed. I think for one, although it is a floppy keyboard, they've actually put magnets in the top now so that it stays closed. So it does no longer flops about when it's in your bag and stuff, which is a win. The other thing is I like the bigger screen on it. I like how much thinner it is. I know people have sort of said how thin it is in reviews, but you need to go and actually see it for yourself to actually believe it. It is incredibly thin. It's insane. Also, it being an ARM-powered device, it's got the LTE built in, which I actually am using way more than I thought I would. Plus, it has great battery life as well, and instant on, you tap the power button and it just wakes up like an iPad. Really, really love that as well. And the reason I like this one way more than any other Surface Pro to date is because it's running ARM. Now, I've argued in the past that this shouldn't be a Surface Pro, it should just be Surface X. And that's exactly how I'm using it. I'm using it as a Surface X. I'm essentially using it as a Chromebook. I have the Microsoft Edge with ARM installed. And instead of installing apps on the Microsoft Store, where I can, I'm just installing the web app. So Spotify, Slack, WhatsApp, they're all the web apps, and I've just installed them through Edge, and it runs like a dream. This is the 8 gig model as well, keep in mind. This isn't the 16 gig one. I got the stock, the sort of baseline entry level model, and I'm having a great time. I'm not seeing any performance issues. I'm not going to say it's the best Surface Microsoft ever made, because it's not. The Surface Laptop 3 is that. But this is probably the second best, or the third best behind the Surface Studio. I do love my Surface Studio. Do you think there will be any more sensors on the Duo that we don't know about yet? For example, the device needs to know which screen you are looking at when you're only using one. I wouldn't say we don't know about them. I think we can say they're obvious sensors, like a gyroscope. That's exactly the kind of sensor you would need to determine whether you're looking at one screen or the other. And I can guarantee you it will have a gyroscope in it. But yeah, we don't know if there's any like unique sensors in it that are unique to Surface Duo. I have a feeling. Well, actually, I don't have a feeling. I have a feeling Microsoft might have a surprise up its sleeve around the camera sensor. For reasons that I can't get into, I just have that in my mind. I guess we'll see. Like I said, I can't talk about anything like that for now. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe what I think I've heard is when I'm barking up the wrong tree. We'll have to wait and see. Given that this was mentioned on Windows Weekly with all the reorganizations lately, including the new Windows and Devices team, do you suspect things will be better for the company in the long run? I don't think Microsoft's vision is going to change. I still think Microsoft is very much focused on building out things like Windows and its devices to enable people to be more productive. I don't think we're going to see Microsoft venture back into consumer markets like music streaming or whatever else, phones. I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think what will happen is There will be, at least with the Windows and Devices team, there will be maybe a renewed interest in building out Windows with unique experiences and sort of making Windows exciting again, not from a fanboy's perspective, but just from an innovation perspective in the tech industry. Windows has become very stagnant, in my opinion, the last few years. Like every year, macOS has a new release and it has new things in it, and it's pretty fun and exciting. Windows has that, but not at the same epic level that Apple's able to pull off every year. Like I said, I can't think of any blockbuster features that have been introduced to Windows over the last 3 releases, I think. I just can't see them. There's no new features. Whatever's been added is just an addition to something that already exists, or a rebuild of a feature that was already part of Windows. I can't think of any, and I'm not thinking, admittedly, no, I can't think of any new features that have been introduced to Windows in a while. Someone in the comments will probably be able to tell me 1 or 2. But I can't think of one off the top of my head. And that's what I'm hoping we'll see now that Windows and Devices are under the same team. What do you think of the new Windows 10 design that is coming soon? I assume you're talking about Windows 10X, in which case I think it's great. It's nice to have a consistent UX that's fluid and functional. And simple, more importantly, modern, minimalist, if you will. Windows 10X is very minimalist, and I like that a lot in design. So I'm very excited about it. Did you hear how Microsoft is going to customize Android on the Duo? Are there any special apps and functionality Microsoft is building to Android? So for the most part, it's stock Android 10. Microsoft is building unique experiences into the gesture navigation to support things like moving apps across displays and stuff, but otherwise it's more or less stock Android 10. It'll have come with Microsoft Edge, Microsoft Launcher, Outlook, and a whole bunch of other apps, Microsoft apps pre-installed, of course. But as far as I'm aware, the SMS and phone apps will be the Google apps built by Google. I don't think Microsoft is building its own apps for that. Microsoft will have its own camera app, which will have its own computational photography, blah blah blah. But yeah, I don't know of anything else specific to the Android experience that Microsoft is building. Like I said, I'm hearing that the software should be done by April, so it's pretty much almost ready as far as I'm aware. Well, it's stock Android in, someone's saying stock Android, but you've just killed my interest in the Joe. It's stock Android in the same way OnePlus's Oxygen OS is stock Android. It takes stock Android and sort of tweaks it here and there, changes a few things, adds a couple of additional things here and there. But it doesn't change the entire UX like Samsung does. Samsung's One UI is Android, but it's more One UI than it is Android because of how they change up almost every UI element on the thing. Surface Duo will very much look like an Android device. It will have, except with just more, the rounded corners in Android are a little bit more squared off on the Surface Duo because I don't know. But yeah, it will still be more stock Android than entirely customized Android. Will you have to use a Gmail account to set up Duo or an MSA? So just like Samsung devices, again, you'll be encouraged to sign in with a Microsoft account, but if you want access to the Google Play Store, you will have to sign in with a Google account. And that will probably be presented to you during setup. You don't have to sign into the Google Play Store if you don't want to, but if you don't want to sign into the Google Play Store, you won't be able to access apps. So, that's something you'll have to measure up as you're setting up the device. Do you think Microsoft has a broader plan for app distribution outside the Microsoft Store? It feels like that the store is less of a focus for them. I think you're right. I think the Microsoft Store has very much fallen behind. Or I say behind. It's like it's on the back burner, which is also the wrong word. It's not a priority for Microsoft, admittedly, and unfortunately, in my opinion. As far as I'm aware, there isn't a dedicated team. There isn't a dedicated Windows Store team anymore. I think it's under another team that sort of has to babysit it. But for the most part, there isn't somebody who wakes up every morning, goes to Microsoft, and is like, right, here's what we're doing with the store today. I don't think there's a backup plan or a change in strategy for app distribution on Windows. However, I don't think the Windows Store can ever go away because app stores are key these days, even though it may not feel like it on desktops. But the Windows Store is actually way better than the Mac's App Store, believe it or not. And I think it would be ridiculous to go back to an era where users are expected to go onto the internet and download an exe to install a program. I've said it more than once. If I can, I will install most of my apps through the Microsoft Store because I just like having the Microsoft Store there to sort of handle updates and just keep everything nice and clean. I like one-click uninstalls and stuff. I think apps through the Microsoft Store is better, way better. But if you're a power user, you may not agree with that. You like the idea of being able to access program files and changing things, DLLs and all that good stuff, which isn't a thing you can really do through apps that are installed from the Microsoft Store. Now, if you are one of those people, you're going to hate Windows 10 X because that's very locked down. But yeah, I don't think we're going to see the Microsoft Store go away. But at the same time, I don't think there's going to be a renewed focus on trying to push the Microsoft Store or building a new experience for people to go and download programs. I think it's just going to be you use the store or you don't use the store. You do it the old way or you have our modern approach. We're not going to force either on you. You can do it how you like. I think really the end goal is to have Microsoft Edge just handle web apps automatically, so you don't even think about installing programs. You just boot up your Windows 10 X machine or Windows PC, you start visiting websites, and Windows secretly pins those apps to your start menu as if they were apps, and now you've just got them. By the looks of it, Manganese will be yet another feature lacking updates, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't think you are wrong. I think 20H2 will very much be a minor update for Windows 10 Desktop. However, if you're in the fast ring, I think you're going to see some interesting experiments this year. Because now the fast ring is a thing that isn't tied to specific releases, Microsoft can essentially use it as an experimental ring for features that are never going to ship on desktop. And deliberately, I don't know if Microsoft will communicate that, but things like the new Action Center on Windows 10 X, or maybe even the new Start menu on Windows 10 X, that can come to desktop in the fast ring, and insiders can test it, even though Microsoft may not have the intention to ever ship it in a version of Windows 10 on desktop. Maybe they will, of course, down the line, but there may be some features where they aren't actually going to ship on desktop, and they know that from the get-go, and they're just using insiders on the desktop as a means to test that feature for Windows 10 X. We'll have to see. What's the status? What's the situation with Windows 10? Is it in maintenance state with Windows 10 taking all the feature focus? Pretty much. I mean, Windows 10 is a mature platform. I need to sneeze. It's gone. Is it gone? It's still there, but it's not there enough. All right, I think it's gone. So Windows 10 is a mature platform that doesn't need new features thrown at it all the time. So the year 2020 is going to be a very minor year for Windows 10 features and whatnot. And that is because Microsoft is focused on 10X and making 10X the best it can possibly be, which in my opinion is more important than building out new features for Windows Desktop. Like I said, Windows Desktop is a mature platform. Most people using it don't really care about new features. They just want to make sure it works. And that's what Microsoft is doing this year. They're essentially just stabilizing Windows 10 Desktop and focusing on the feature focus and all the innovation on 10X. And I think that's the right thing to do this year. Like I said, I'm giving Microsoft a free pass on boring Windows 10 updates this year, but 2021, I'm expecting things to go back to, new features here, new features there. We'll have to see how that happens, though. All right, a couple more questions, I think. If I can find any, that is. How likely is it that Microsoft is going to release a 7C version of the Go 2 alongside the M3 version? I think we talked about this on last week's podcast. But I wouldn't be surprised if the entry-level Surface Go 2 is a Snapdragon 7C, with the M3 version being the higher-end model. We'll have to see, though. Will Windows 10X run x86 apps emulated or natively? It runs them natively, virtualized. It's containerized. So how a Win32... this is how I believe it works, based on a few things I've seen. When you launch a legacy Windows app on Windows 10X, what's happening is, in the background, the OS spins up a legacy version of Windows so that you can run that program. And then it places the Win32 program on the modern Windows 10X desktop as if it was a native app. Which it is, technically. It's native to the legacy operating system that's running in the background. So essentially you're running a VM and then taking that app and then placing it on your actual desktop on 10X. So while it's native, it is a VM. And it will be a lightweight VM. It won't be full Windows. It'll be a sort of very streamlined version of legacy Windows 10. So it hopefully shouldn't take up too much RAM, and it shouldn't take too long to boot up either. But yeah, so I would say that at least for the initial Win32 program you launch, it would take a little bit longer to load than, say, if it was on a normal Windows 10 PC. But once you've booted up the legacy Windows app, if you launch other legacy Windows apps, they should just launch straight away because that VM is already running. Once they're all closed, of course, then that VM goes to sleep and frees up RAM and whatever else. So you may have already answered, is Windows 10X delayed? Not as far as I'm aware, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is. That's basically what I've got to say. But as far as I'm aware, no, it hasn't been delayed. It's still coming holiday 2020. If it has been delayed, we might find that out next week at the developer day. So there'll be a performance hit compared to full Windows. Like I said, for the initial Win32 program you launch, most likely there will be a bit of a delay because it has to spin up that VM. But once that's up, if you launch more of them, it should just launch pretty much instantly because it's already running in the background. But yeah, there will be a general system performance hit running legacy programs because that's just the nature of Win32 programs. Don't be buying a Windows 10X device to run Win32 programs exclusively. You shouldn't do that. Anything interesting expected for Build 2020? Not that I'm aware of. I mean, obviously Windows 10X is hopefully going to be a big talking point, but we'll have to see. So where exactly is Windows 10X behind on? I mean, Windows Core OS already shipped with HoloLens 2, so it is mostly the shell stuff that are behind. The specific user experiences that sit on top of Windows Core for Windows 10X can be behind. Also, specific features that plug into Windows Core can also be behind. Just because Windows Core is done doesn't mean the specific SKUs that can be built on it are done as well. That's not how it works. HoloLens 2, for example, is done. That's shipping. And that's Windows Core. But that doesn't mean Windows 10X is done as well. I heard that Windows 10X was supposed to be feature complete this month, or maybe it was last month. January, February, it's supposed to be feature complete. Which is why I've also been hearing that they've started to cut things from the release because they haven't had time to finish it. But I don't know what they've cut. So I'll tell you what, we'll see next week when developer day shows up. Maybe they've cut things that they never announced, so we won't even know that it was cut. Do we know how long Surface Duo will be kept updated and get a major updates? We don't, unfortunately. But if Microsoft is treating Duo like any other Android flagship, it'll be 2 years of major updates and 3 years of security updates. So it'll get Android 11, Android 12, and then it will get security updates a year after that. But maybe Microsoft will decide to support it longer. We don't know. Does Panos now have control of 10X? He has control of the Windows UX. And I believe that extends to Windows Core SKUs as well. I could be wrong on that, but as I would say yes. He now has he has ultimate control over the user experience and feature set on Windows 10X. I feel like he's been working very closely with the 10X team to begin with anyway, so I don't think we're going to see much change in that area. I think we'll see more changes on the desktop side than the 10X side. Right, I think that's pretty much it for now. Thank you all for tuning in. Like I said. Oh, one more question. Would the Duo get dynamic wallpaper and stuff like the Neo? I don't know. Android supports dynamic wallpapers. Pixel has them. So it's definitely a possibility, but I haven't been able to confirm if that's the thing. Anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. Like I said, Dan will be back next week as always. There'll be lots to talk about regarding 10X next week since Developer Day is happening. But until then, follow us on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter, and we'll keep you updated when the show's going live. Until then, goodbye.